Welcome back, everyone, to CoffeeU. We're so happy that you're here with us, friends, and people that want to know more about coffee. We hope all of you will be friends. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brad.
And we're very pleased to be here with you on CoffeeU talking about coffee processing. Now, Brad.
Yes.
What do we mean when we say coffee processing?
Well, when we talk about coffee processing, we really talk about how the cherry is fermented. So when you look at a coffee label on our bags, especially, we put in there the processing method. And what that means is how the farmer, the producer, is going to infuse flavor into the seed. So flavor comes from a lot of areas. The area where the coffee is grown, it plays a huge role. The roast profile, the coffee seed in general, how, if it's high quality or low quality, the brewing method, all those things play a part. But really fermentation is where we really start seeing the natural flavors of the coffee seed come out.
Now, you keep saying cherry and seed. Will you remind everyone what you mean by that?
Yeah. So the coffee bean, I say, quote, bean, isn't a bean. Of course, it's the seed of a fruit. And so we call that fruit a cherry. It's about the size of what we would typically think of as a cherry. The seed is inside there. And as the cherry matures on the tree, it starts at a green or a yellowish green. And then over time, we'll get into the pink and red and even a dark purple if it sits on there long enough. There's one variety of coffee that's a yellow that actually matures to a yellow fruit. It's called a yellow Caturra, but those are kind of rare to find. So.
Okay. So what are the main methods of coffee processing?
Yeah, so the first one is natural, and that was the original.
Okay.
If you've listened to our History of Coffee podcast from season 1, you know that Yemen.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. While the coffee tree itself originated in Ethiopia, how coffee is harvested, even processed and brewed, really started in Yemen. Yemeni farmers figured out how to ferment coffee cherries naturally. And what we mean by that is the fruit is harvested from the tree. And in Yemen especially, a lot of times they take them onto the roofs of their homes and they'll just lay the coffee cherries out and they'll let the sun and the dry, arid environment in the high mountains of Yemen dry the coffee cherries in the fruit itself. And after that, then they'll take them and remove the seed and dry it and get it ready for transportation to wherever they're going to sell it.
Now, which of our coffees are the natural processed?
Right now, of course, the Yemen is a natural. Our Ethiopia is a natural, and the China's a washed, actually. Now we switched to a washed China. And the Honduras is a natural. So, naturals typically lend themselves to more fruitier flavors. When we talk about body as a cup, in the cup, that just means how kind of thick it feels in your mouth. They tend to be thicker bodies compared to other processing methods. Now, of course, there's variations in that, and depending on where the coffee's from and the coffee variety can play a role in that too. But they can be tricky to roast. A lot of roasters don't like them because they can be harder to roast, but we really like them because of the bold flavors they kind of give out, and really the fruit-forward flavors they can produce.
So we talked about natural processing. What other types of processing are there?
Yeah, the one that's become really famous and popular, especially in places that have a lot of water, is the wash process. So the wash process, usually the farmer will take the outer layer of skin off the fruit, and then they will place that in a water bath, and the cherries will ferment actually in this water bath. Timing varies. It can be 48 hours, 72 hours, kind of depends on the farmer and what he wants to do. But that is becoming very popular because it's a little easier and it makes it easier to roast. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know all the chemical reaction stuff that happens. But the chemical reactions that happen within the seed itself lend it to be more stable as a roasting seed compared to the naturals, or even the honey, which we'll talk about later. We talked about the natural started in Yemen, 15th century. The wash process really didn't start being used till the 1800s in the Caribbean, and Jamaican and modern day Haitian farmers started washing their coffees, and mainly because they were growing cacao, and their cacao plants got a fungus and it killed them, and so they started planting coffee, and they basically just said, well, it's a similar type of structure on the seed. Why don't we just process this coffee like we were doing the cacao seed? And that's kind of how the wash process was born for coffee. Interesting. It's pretty cool. So, yeah, wash coffees are really good, especially for people who, we say it's great for people who are kind of getting into specialty coffee because the flavor profiles, while you can get some really good wash coffees that are super bold in flavor, typically they tend to be a little bit more subdued from the natural and easier to roast, like we said. And they're great for blends, especially for espresso, because they hold their flavor profile a little longer than the naturals would. So, yeah, that's our natural and our washed.
What else do we have? What other type of processing?
So there's another one that's not as well known. It's called wet hold. And you really only find this in really humid environments, especially in Southeast Asia. So Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all those Southeast Asian countries, they do what's called a wet hold. And really, I personally have not found a wet hold coffee that was just amazing.
Okay.
There are some good ones. If you notice, at Baba John, we've never had a wet hold coffee because I've tried. We've tested a lot of them. We've sampled them. Just haven't had one yet. I'm not saying, so if you have a wet hold coffee out there and you want to send it to us, we're happy to sample it and try it. But we just haven't found one that we really like. So what happens is, because it's so humid, they have to remove almost all the fruit off the seed before they even ferment it. And so that can be usually what they will take the fruit off and they'll let it ferment, similar to a natural out in the sun. But the moisture content in that seed does not get really low. So going back to, I didn't mention this, but in naturals and washed, when they let those dry after they've been fermented, typically the moisture content between 11 and 20% moisture. Typically they would try to stay lower to the 11%. For wet hold, it's 25, 35, 40% moisture, which is still a lot. And the problem is the seed is more prone to molding because the moisture content's so high. So you have to be really careful when you're processing those. And it's, the flavor profiles typically are kind of earthier. They can be bold, but chocolatey notes typically are coming out of those. So again, I haven't had a great one. I've had some good ones, but I'm always open to finding some good wet hold coffees if we can find them. So.
I don't know that I've ever even tried a wet hold coffee.
Yeah, well, we've never sold them here. So again, if you have a great one, send it to us. We're happy to try it.
Yeah,
we can sell it. So
we've talked about all of the other traditional methods of processing, except for the one called honey processing.
Correct.
Tell us about honey processing.
Yeah, honey's a kind of a newer one. It really falls under the natural processing method because it dries or ferments either in the sun or in a shade, typically it's called raised beds. So kind of a screen is laid out, raised above the ground to let air flow above and below the coffee seed. But whereas a natural, they leave the fruit intact. In a honey process, they will leave just the meat of the fruit on. They'll take the skin off. The meat's called the mucilage. They'll leave the mucilage on and they'll let that ferment on a raised bed. And, it's called honey because as it ferments, the fruit will produce a kind of a sap or a honey and kind of gets sticky and It can be a little difficult to deal with because it gets sticky. So usually you can just kind of take a rake and go back and forth over the coffees to let them, so they're all getting equal airflow. That the honeys, you almost have to use your hands to maneuver them around. So it can be a little difficult, but if you can do the honey processing well and let it ferment, that way, man, honeys can produce some really, really good flavors. I think I said the Honduras was the natural before. It's actually a honey process.
Oh, okay.
And so if you taste that Honduras, it is really fruity, and you'll really enjoy that one. And so that kind of leads us into
Dun, 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 the controversy.
a controversial honey process. So
What is co-fermentation?
yeah, it is very controversial. We'll talk about why. It is a newer processing method. I mean, less than 10 years old. I actually found the first kind of co-fermented coffee in Saudi Arabia, believe it or not.
Okay.
A couple years ago when I was at a coffee farm there, this guy was showing me, he was co-fermenting some coffee cherries with like cardamom and ginger and
Interesting.
clove, and it was very interesting. But what is it, and why is it controversial?
Yeah,
That's
why is
the
it
main thing.
controversial?
So first of all, we have to define what it is. So co-fermentation, sometimes you'll hear infused coffees. It's where they take the coffee cherry, and again, they either do it in fruit, meaning skin, everything's still intact, or they'll do it kind of as a honey process. Either way, they will put the cherries in either a bag, like a plastic bag, or some sort of like a barrel, and then they'll include something in it, like I said, like spices or dried fruits,
Okay.
which is a very popular thing to do right now. And the coffee will ferment multiple days with this dried fruit or spices. And what's going to happen is the flavors from that fruit are going to infuse into the coffee seed, along with the natural flavors of the coffee cherry that's already there. So you're kind of combining two flavor profiles into one cherry.
Is that adding flavor to coffee?
Yeah, people keep asking me that, and I would say yes, but not in the way that we typically say flavored. So you can go to your grocery store right now. You can look on the shelf and you can find flavored coffees.
Yeah,
I've
sure.
seen butter pecan, toffee. I mean, the
Whatever
Green
flavor
Mermaid
you
does it
want.
all the time too. But a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
And it's very popular. I mean, one of my first coffee experiences I still remember was, if you remember Barney's,
Mm-hmm. Sure, of course.
they used to do this Santa's White Christmas coffee. I think they coated it in like white chocolate and then dusted it with coconut. And I loved it.
Yeah.
But this was, 20 years ago. So, but I started learning more about, when I started learning more about specialty coffee and how flavor gets built at the fermentation method, I was like, well, that's probably not great. So when we talk about co-fermentation, it's a little bit more involved than just adding flavor to coffee beans. So typically when roasters do that, they're going to take the roasted coffee, they put it in a barrel or bag, whatever, and they'll take a flavored oil or, like I said, like some...
So it's post-roast.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And they'll just put it on there, mix it up, and a lot of times that's not natural.
Okay.
It's a chemical-based thing that they're
Yeah,
putting on there
obviously,
to
yeah.
create flavor. So there's not a lot of science that goes into that, really. I mean, other than you got to measure out the amount of flavor you
Right.
want. So
right. It's more of a recipe.
yeah, exactly. And that's not what we're doing here. So what's happening is those producers or farmers are taking the natural fruits in the area they live in, and they're using those to infuse even more flavor into their coffee cherries, into the seeds, sorry. And so there's definitely science involved in that, in the fermentation. And it's not really that different than doing a naturally processed, than actual fermentation. You're still infusing flavor into the seed. They're just adding another fruit to the mix outside of the coffee cherry that's already there. So I understand the controversy. the SCA has said those coffees aren't allowed in competitions, which I understand, makes sense. But we see it as a way for farmers to sell more coffee.
Okay.
As a way to help farmers build a better life for themselves and for their communities. And, they're just also trying to find ways to innovate. So,
Right.
Again, for a while, natural was the only way to ferment coffee.
Right.
Until these
other processing
Caribbean
methods.
farmers were like, hey, let's try this thing, Then honey process came along. So
Was it controversial? You
honey
think?
wasn't really controversial because they were still using the fruit, the coffee cherry. So there was no real controversy there. So, but we enjoy it, and I've had some really good co-fermented coffees, and so now
Do we have any co-fermented coffees?
we do actually, and that's part of the reason we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Is one of our partners, Forest Coffee, they came up a couple months ago, brought some coffees for us to try, and they brought this passion fruit co-fermented coffee, and it was unbelievable. And I told them I got to have this, and so we only bought 150 pounds of it, so it's not a lot. That's all they had left.
Yeah.
So it is on our shelf. It is on our website. So I highly recommend you try it out. You can go into our store if you want to get a pour over of it. You can do that. It's really, really good.
You better get it before I drink it all.
That's right. That's right. There's only 150 pounds, so actually less than that now because we've sold some. So go in and try it. Let us know what you think. We really think it's a fantastic coffee. You get that passion fruit flavor in the beginning, and then you start getting the kind of the natural notes of the coffee cherry itself. Kind of get some more tropical fruits in there, even some vanilla. If you let it cool, actually, it's really nice as it cools down. So, which is really interesting that a coffee would improve as it cools down, but this one really does. So we really like it. So the farmers in Colombia, this is where this is from, they actually do multi-fermentation,
Oh, wow.
which, so the cherries, they actually ferment the cherries in fruit for 24 hours.
Okay.
All right. And then they add the dried passion fruit later, and then it ferments for 5 days with
Really?
that dried, which is really long actually for fermentation. Typically fermentation is 3 days, maybe 4. So 5 days is a long time, but it really allows a lot of flavor to get infused in there. The thing about that, you got to be careful. Like we talked about, anytime you're fermenting something, it can start to mold. So, but they've done a great job with it, and the guys at Forest Coffee, they do great work. So if you've had our Colombia Pink Power Bourbon, that's from them. That's a good coffee as well. So, yeah, we're excited about it. And again, controversial, but it's okay.
Would everyone on the Baba Java team think it's still specialty?
Yeah, well, that's even a good question for the coffee industry in general, because there are a lot of people who do not think it should be considered that.
Okay.
And then there are people who say the seed itself is specialty when it's harvested. There's no reason to not consider it that, even though it has flavor infused. Again, it's super controversial for that reason, because there are some people who really don't think you should be doing infused if you're a specialty roaster or cafe. So
Let's compare and contrast.
let's do it.
Adding flavor versus co-fermenting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how are they similar?
They are similar in that you are adding flavor, of course. But again, you're kind of doing that already with fermentation anyway.
Right.
You're infusing the flavor of the coffee cherry into the seed. So in that way, just pouring flavored oil over some roasted coffee and infusing or co-fermenting with the fruit, you are technically adding flavor in both of those.
Okay. How are they different then?
Yeah, so with co-fermentation, there is science involved. There is fermentation.
And it's during the processing
Yeah, exactly.
process, the processing process.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. So the producer has to be really diligent about, you have to make sure those seeds are getting moved around every day. You can't just leave it there. So You have to create airflow in the coffee cherries, and then all the post processing that has to happen after that, where they remove the cherries, put it through a depulping machine, remove the fruit. You're left with just the seed and it's called the parchment around it. That has to dry. So there's still a lot of steps involved in making sure that coffee it still tastes good. Because even after you ferment, if you don't do the rest of the steps correctly, you can come out with a bad coffee. So,
Right.
On the just adding flavored oil, I guess the only mistake is you put too much or too little. To me, flavored oils or whatever, however they do it, sweeteners, it can cover up bad roasting.
Well, most of the time it's not. I mean, it's not specialty coffee anyway. If
Most
you're
of the time,
adding,
yeah. I've never heard of a specialty roaster just flavoring their coffee post roast. So usually it's done by roasters who are trying to cover up bad roasting or even a bad quality seed to begin with.
Okay. So it's controversial, but we're going with it. We're going to try it. We're going to try it.
We're going with it.
See how it goes.
If customers like it, we'll keep buying it. Again, it's helping farmers out. They're trying to innovate and grow the fermentation world, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's similar. Having whiskeys that are aged in different types of barrels.
And things like
you're
that.
infusing flavors from there, and nobody bats an eye at that.
Even bourbon, even some bourbons now are they're to be a bourbon has to be in a new cask.
Yeah.
But then sometimes they age them in like other casks,
Right.
and it kind of changes the flavor profile.
And similar with even wines. I know that
they've been doing that for a long time.
As far as I know, I could be wrong. If anybody can correct me. As far as I know, there's no controversy surrounding those aging processes. So
yeah, we're not in that world, so
we're not.
I don't
and
know.
There may be some, but we're excited about it. We think it's a great coffee. I know you guys will enjoy it too. So go grab a cup or a bag or a tube. We're selling them in 8-ounce tubes. So grab one and again, write us back. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, I like it. It's very tasty to me.
It's very good.
So
I enjoy it too.
I think you will too. But you better hurry because I'm going to drink it all.
That's right. I don't know when this will air, but y'all better get on it because it's going to finish soon. So.
Well, thanks, Brad. That was very informative about all of our processing methods.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Some that are traditional, some that are non-traditional, and new and innovative.
And controversial.
And controversial in coffee in general, and then within Baba Java Circle, Baba Java Circle also. So, thanks for joining us today. It was great to have you here, and we look forward to seeing you next time on CoffeeU. Hit it!
In this episode of Coffee News, some good news actually from the SCA taking over the Q grading program. We've mentioned that before, and it has been very controversial, both positive and negative. But one good thing that has come out is the Specialty Coffee Association announced tiered pricing for all of their new education and initiatives coming up. That includes the new Q grading program that they will be establishing. So depending on where you live in the world, how much you pay will be based on your standard of living where you are, which is very good for low-income countries. So Specialty Coffee Association is now making education more affordable and approachable no matter where you live in the world. So you can find more information on that at the SCA's website, sca.coffee, and just click the education tab and they'll have a lot more information about their new pricing tiers there. In today's episode of Baba Beat, we are highlighting some new wholesale clients that have come on board recently. And one of those is the Aiden Cafe in Homewood in the Wildwood area, right next to Mr. Wang's there in Wildwood. They are two guys from Yemen, very nice guys, cousins, families from Yemen. They are serving Baba Java coffee, espresso-based drinks, but also they are doing some amazing crepes, ice cream there. They even have some Arab sweets that you can check out. They have the famous Dubai chocolate that you can go go grab some from them, and they will treat you right. And you can even sit on the floor in a Bedouin style seating. So go check them out, Aiden Cafe in Wildwood, and tell them you heard about them from us. Not that you'll get a discount, but they might. Who knows? Two other places, Altadena Valley Presbyterian Church, just started using our coffee. And so if you worship there or are thinking about going there, you will get some good coffee while you worship. And also the Rise Apartments in Homewood started using our coffee in their Welcome Center. So if you're living there or thinking about living there, go grab a cup of coffee and talk to the nice people there at Rise. So, and if you're interested in getting your coffee in your office, church, cafe, just email clientservices@babajavacoffee.com, and Mr. Lee Weidman will happily help you out in whatever way he can. And this is today's Baba Beat.